The Depression Project, Part 1. What I'm about to tell you has haunted me for the past 3 years, and I never told anybody about it, until now. I work as security for a big medical research company. I started a few years ago, and it was a pretty normal day-to-day job, for the most part. I'd spend most of my working hours staring at camera feeds and patrolling around the perimeter, with no incidents ever occurring. Then one day, I was called into the office for a talk with the big shots in the company. Some of the higher-ups, which I'd never seen before, were there, so I expected them to either fire me over something I screwed up, or even worse, a lawsuit or whatever. The reason for calling me in caught me by surprise. You've been with us for a while now, and you've proven yourself to be a valuable asset to the company. But I can tell, you're made for bigger things. How would you like to undertake a more momentous project? One of the bosses grinned widely. He went on to explain that the company was going through an experimental project which, if done correctly, could cure depression. They all seemed especially excited about it, stating it would go down in history. The catch was, I would need to take a 2-month-long trip to one of the company's compounds where the experiment was to be conducted. I would have to stay there for the entirety of the experiment and would be briefed on the details upon arrival. I was about to politely decline, but when they mentioned the compensation, my jaw dropped. Before I knew it, I was on a plane to the compound where I would meet the rest of the staff. Upon landing, I was escorted to a remote mountain area where the facility was located. I wouldn't have even seen the facility had it not been for the bulkhead door leading underground. I noticed that the company didn't cut any corners with the construction of the facility. The facility itself was divided into 2 sections, east, where the patients would be, and west for the staff. The middle was designed as a control room. The whole compound was very ostentatious in regards of high-tech equipment, electronic doors, rooms and amenities provided for the participants, etc. There were a dozen other team members on board, including 3 other security members, a medic, specialists in psychology and psychiatry, and the team lead, Dr. Miller. 5 volunteers who were diagnosed with depression were with us, who were familiar with the project. Our escorts reminded us that we were not allowed to leave the compound from the start of the experiment until the end, so as to not disrupt the project due to its sensitivity. The subjects were not even allowed to exit the rooms for 2 months. We were told we can simply send a message via the master computer in case of an emergency, and their escorts would be there within minutes. Once inside, Dr. Miller briefed us on our duties. As security, mine was to simply patrol the area, monitor the live feed on the cameras, and restrain the subjects in case they acted up. Miller explained that every night at exactly 9:43 p.m., the subjects would be exposed to a certain radio frequency over the course of 4 seconds, which would affect their brain and eventually successfully eliminate depression completely. He didn't go into details about how exactly it's supposed to work. All the staff would be wearing noise-canceling headphones to avoid exposure to the signal, due to possible adverse effects. We settled in and prepared for the first day of work. The research team was conducting surveys and tests on the subjects, while I did exactly what I did back at the company, watched the live feed. At 9:30, Miller assembled all the staff in the control room for the radio signal. He spoke to the patients through the loudspeakers, asking them to be as quiet as possible, since it was almost time for the radio signal to be played through the loudspeakers. Miller gave all of us a pair of soundproof headphones, and personally made sure they were adequately set on each member. All outside noises were instantly silenced when I put on my set. Once that was done, the doc put on a pair of his own ears and pressed a button on the desk. A bright red light appeared above our heads, which indicated that the headphones are to be kept on until it was over. Miller observed us one more time, and after he made sure we were strapped in, he pressed the button. After a few seconds, he pressed the same button again, and the red light turned into a green one. He took off his headphones and the rest of us followed. "Subjects, please raise your hands as I call on you," Miller said over the loudspeakers and proceeded to call their names. Subject 1, Subject 2, Subject 3. Subject 3, please raise your hand. Subject 3, do you hear my voice? The first two subjects responded, but the third one just sat, motionless, staring blankly in front of himself. Subject 3. Miller became impatient. Damn it. Security, please go make sure all subjects are alright. Research team, proceed with the survey, and please use caution. I went along with one of the security members and two of the doctors to the east section where the subjects were detained. I looked through the thick glass door in Subject 1's room and he seemed okay. Subject 2 was fine as well. With each subject I checked. I'd swipe my cards on the door to unlock it and the research team would proceed to examine the subjects. When I approached the door for Subject 3, he still sat on his bed with his gaze fixed to the wall in front. "Hey buddy." I knocked on the door loudly. "Are you okay in there?" No response. "Hey, can you hear me?" Not even a blink. I stared at the subject through the thick pane of glass, and I couldn't make it out from the noise of the other staff members, but it looked like the subject's lips were moving. I swiped the keycard on the door and it slid open. I carefully stepped inside, observing the subject and his surroundings. His room seemed pristine, just as the day when we arrived. His half-unpacked bags in the corner of the room. I looked at him carefully, focusing on the movement of his lips. He was indeed saying something, but I couldn't make it out. "Sir," I called him again, "are you okay?" He turned his head towards me very slowly while still sitting in the same position. "I'm fine." He grinned widely, not blinking. I can't explain why, but when he looked at me, I felt my hairs on the back of my neck stand straight. Something in that unrelenting gaze that made every fiber of my being want to bolt out of there. But I just couldn't put my finger on it. Luckily, one of the doctors stepped in as he did. The subject seemed to return to normal, grin gone and all. I got out of there as fast as I could without arousing any attention. Subjects 4 and 5 were responsive, so I was dismissed for the rest of the evening. The following day, I had guard duty, so I spent most of the time staring at camera feeds. The subjects were doing their normal everyday activities and having examinations by the medical staff. But other than that, nothing in particular happened. I observed Subject 3 carefully, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Night came, and it was time for the signal to be played once again. The subjects were told to stand facing the door this time, while the signal was played and to be ready for inspection. We all repeated the routine, headphones on, red light on. Something was different this time though. Although I couldn't hear the signal, I felt something when Miller pressed the buttons. It's hard to explain, but it felt as if for those 4 seconds I was standing naked in the dark in front of God knows what. I had never felt so vulnerable in my entire life like I did during those 4 seconds. I heard one of my coworkers whisper my name, but when I looked to them, they were focused on Miller. There was no way I heard anything through these headphones, so had my brain played a trick on me from the deafening silence? I became increasingly agitated for some reason and wanted to just throw those headphones on the ground. This effect seems to have been mutual with everyone, because they looked restless, shifting their weight from one leg to another, looking around at seemingly nothing in particular, etc. One of the staff members ignored Miller's warnings and took the headphones off while the light was still red, but Miller hadn't noticed it because he was transfixed on the cameras. The light finally turned green, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I took off my headset. Miller spoke over the loudspeakers to the subjects again. "Subject 1, raise your hand." It was then that I glanced at the cameras and noticed that all 5 subjects were still standing motionless. I would have thought the cameras froze had it not been for the timer in the corner. "Subject 1, raise your hand." Miller repeated, but to no avail. "Security, please check up on them." This time, 2 other security guards took the role of securing the subjects. I watched on the feed as they approached the doors and tried to get a response from them, but they just stared blankly. One of the guards opened the door to Subject 1's room and entered, and then, all of a sudden, the power went out and the entire room was enveloped in darkness and total silence. And then I heard what sounded like a cacophony of gunshots and the most blood-curdling, demonic scream I'd ever heard in my life, coming from the east section. Seconds later, a frantic set of footsteps resounded in the corridor next to the control room, and one of the guards barged in, breathing heavily with a look of pure terror in his face. "Lock the east section now!" he shouted between breaths. "Why, what happened?" Miller asked. "Just do it!" the guard ordered. The power came back on, and Miller slammed a button which beeped loudly. The guard holstered his gun and entered the room, exhaling loudly. "Oh my God," I heard one of the staff members mumble. Even Miller was pale as a sheet of paper. "Whatever those patients were before," he said as we stared in horror at what was on the camera feed. "They're no longer human." This is Kinetic Symphony. If you've enjoyed this narrated story, please subscribe and like the video to help me grow. Thank you.